Wednesday, December 12th, 2018, Maneco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. This morning I want to talk about how the state and its apparatus, like central banks, are solely responsible for inflation and the debasement of their currency, the currency we are forced to use. There's a lot of brainwashing and fallacies nowadays. I like to also say that the main mission of this channel is to educate people in these matters of money and how to protect themselves and how to detect the deception from the establishment as it concerns money, the monetary system, and I'd like to thank as well all the interest that I've been getting lately, new subscribers. I'd like to thank the existing subscribers, and that's why I wanted to kind of reiterate my mission, as many of you are new to the channel. So today I'll talk about the subject of inflation and how sticking to the true definition is really important in trying to not be brainwashed about these subjects. Before that, of course, I'm going to look at the markets and see what they're doing this morning. It's around 7:40 a.m. So yesterday was another interesting day. We saw the stock market do really well, and then it fizzled out. The Dow finished down on the day. Silver kind of outperformed gold a little bit. Gold, as usual, seems to be a lot of it's like last week was a very encouraging week, and as it usually happens, you think it's going to keep going, and you know, the cartel, the central banks, the bullion banks, the powers that be, kind of, they're desperately, it feels like, looking at the market and the price action, it feels they're desperately trying to keep the price from going higher at the moment. So gold is at 1242.60, down about 50 cents. High's been 1246.40. Low is right around here, 1242.20. Silver 1456, up a couple of cents. High's been 1464 and the low 1452. The Dow is up 112 at 24,483. So that 24,000 level is still key support. So we're up just under 0.5%. S&P 500 is at 2648, up about 11, also up 0.4%. NASDAQ 100 future 67.45, up 0.2% or 43 points. What about the currencies? Well, the pound virtually unchanged. We are actually at 124.91, so we broke even through 125 yesterday. We're at basically unchanged from late yesterday, though. Euro 113.12, so only up about 4 ticks. So markets are very quiet, FX markets at the moment. Dollar up slightly against the yen, nominally 5 pips as well. Dollar down 0.25% against the yuan at 688.70. There's all these headlines, you know, about this trade dispute. You know, they seem to be driving the markets for now. But as I've said before, technical picture for the stock market doesn't look great, in my opinion. I'm not here to predict when the exact date when things are going to happen, but over the medium to longer term, I think we're going to keep going lower. WTI crude oil is up about 0.75% at 52.20. So we're a little higher than yesterday. Brent is up 0.8% at 60.75. The bond market, let's have a look. The 10-year yield is creeping back up. It's at 2.89. What about Italy? I haven't talked about Italy lately. Well, things seem to have calmed down there. The 10-year BTP yield is at 3.07, so comfortably below the highs we've seen this year, but around 370, I would say. If you think the Maneco 64 channel adds value to you and you'd like to contribute or help the channel, check the links below in the description. So I was talking about the mission of my channel is to educate people on the question of money and how the mainstream media, mainstream economists, the central banks actually lie to us about what's going on. They don't really tell us the truth about inflation. They call the measure of CPI inflation. That's only a measurement of the rise in the cost of living. So, it's very important because there's an old quote attributed to Lenin, and it says, the best way to destroy the capitalist system is to debauch the currency. Apparently he also said at the time that very few people ever know that that's happening. Only, 99% of the people don't know it's happening. The capitalist system is corrupt. It's not doing well right now, but I would argue that what we have now is not a capitalist system, that they've kind of destroyed that system, and it's becoming more of a fascist, corporatist, central banking system. So the other thing I wanted to note is that, I'm even I fall victim to that sometimes. There's one of the viewers in the channel, he always notes, we don't have money today, what we have is a fraud. You need to be very specific. Yes, I agree, what we have today that you have in your wallet or you spend in your card is fiat currency, and it's fraudulent because the banks, commercial banks, with the help of the central banks and the power of the state to tax you, they're able to create this out of thin air, and it's backed by your efforts, your work, your capital. So it's kind of a slave-driven system. They back, their instrument of control with your actions, your effort, your labor, and and I thought about that yesterday when I was reading this article from The Guardian, and it says IMF warns storm clouds are gathering for the next financial crisis, from The Guardian. It says Deputy Head David Lipton says global banking system is not prepared for another downturn. He says that the storm clouds of the next global financial crisis are gathering despite world financial system being unprepared for another downturn. The deputy head of the IMF has warned. One of the things he says is that made me think about this, how they suck, the wealth out of us. He said the IMF went into the last crash under-resourced. What does under-resourced mean? I mean, the IMF doesn't have any wealth. It sucks it out of you, right? Before it was handed a war chest worth $1 trillion from governments around the world, while adding that it was important that national leaders had agreed to complete a review of the fund's financial firepower next year. So what's this firepower? Well, this firepower is just like them, the IMF, the central banks, the governments, having the power to just write a number and and create this credit out of nothing and put it on your back as debt, the taxpayer. The IMF doesn't have mining operations, they're not finding any real tangible resources. I think it's one of the reasons why people are starting to wake up, with the Gilets jaunes in France, and it's spreading. One of the things they say is that the cost of living has been rising and rising, and they, their wages are not keeping up with it, and, they can't survive. And that's the consequence of this system, the fiat money system. Central bankers They think they can just like keep rates at zero, that they can print the money and they can twig these statistics and try to tell you that everything is great. But in the real world, that's what's happening. It would be great, if people were more aware of what's really going on. Unfortunately, a lot of these protesters, a lot of the people that are unhappy, they don't realize, they don't realize where the problem comes from, that it comes from the money. A lot of them, all they want is more pay rises. Not that I'm saying they're earning enough, but they want more pay rises. And they want the state and this apparatus that has, sucked the blood out of them. They want them to keep sucking the blood from others to give to them, and it won't work. We need to people need to realize that the current system of central banking, fiat money, the bankers and the politicians working together, all the debt that they're using as resources to keep their system going is fraudulent, and we need to go back. Abolish the central banks. We need to go back to small governments. I've made videos before already that statists and people who love big government hate precious metals as money because it imposes honesty and discipline. Politicians and bankers can't just create it willy-nilly. They have to think before they borrow the money or try to tax you. And one of the interesting things I saw about this David Lipton guy, he's a bankster. He's a banker. He worked for a Citibank. He worked for More Capital, a hedge fund, and he worked for the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. I would say that's actually the Carnegie Endowment for International Conflict, but that's another story. So there you go, a banker saying that we need to tax the public even more and put it through the IMF for the next crisis. No, Mr. Lipton, what we need is an honest system where you guys will be kept in check. Banking and money is supposed to be more like a utility. Is not, and if you want to speculate, Mr. Lipton, and your friends want to speculate, use your own money. And don't come asking us for bailout when you lose it. So the other thing I wanted to talk about, the state being the only institution or being behind actually inflation and the only institution that can actually create inflation. And inflation is just cheating. It's a tax. It's like robbing you because they can create this legal tender, lawful money out of thin air. And it leads to higher prices. It's a simple law of supply and demand. The more money they create out of thin air, if the economy doesn't keep up, real things in the economy will go up. It doesn't matter if they, and they can keep lying about the CPI, which is not inflation. And you notice, and people are blind to it still, the majority of people. They, you listen to people when you go out and you say, wow, this has gone up so much. A lot of times now I say, well, actually it hasn't. It's the pound that's gone down. And they look at you, what are you talking about? So that's why, I've got here a dictionary from the 70s, and it's not in great condition. The Merriam-Webster dictionary right here. And I've gone to the page here, 365, and I've looked at inflation. What does it say? Number 3, an abnormal increase in the volume of money and credit, resulting in a substantial and continuous rise in the general price level. So nowadays, I guess this happens in other countries as well, but here in the UK, they come out with these phony statistics. One is called the CPI, Consumer Price Index. The other one is RPI. And bankers, the economists, the politicians, they use that to tell you that there's no inflation, right? But that's not inflation, as you can see. It's just a measure of the cost of living. And a lot of times you see a headline. Inflation goes up on the as price of shoes go up, and it's total BS, of course, because inflation is purely a monetary phenomenon, and it can only occur when the government, through legal tender laws, fraudulently allows the banking system to create money out of thin air, or currency out of thin air, I would say, and it allows the bankers to use the fractional reserve system. And what does that mean? Well, that means if you put £1 in the bank will lend like many times over that amount. They leverage it. So that's what it's all about. And yeah, people need to wake up to that. And that's why I do these videos. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit the like button. It helps the YouTube algorithms. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. You can also follow me on Steemit, DTube, and on Twitter. I wish you all a great day, and I'll talk to you later. Take care. Bye.